Welcome to Bible Fiber, where we explore the textures and shades of the biblical tapestry. I'm Shelley Neese, president of the Jerusalem Connection, a Christian organization dedicated to sharing the stories of Israel's people, both ancient and modern. Bible Fiber is a one-year sprint through the foundational narratives of the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah. As we follow the weekly Jewish reading calendar, we arrive at this week's Torah portion, called Vayishlah, which means, and he sent. The portion covers Genesis 32:4 through 36:43. At the start of the passage, we find our patriarch Jacob returning to the Promised Land after 20 years of living in Haran. That means it has also been 2 decades since he faced his brother Esau. The last time they were together, Esau was furious with Jacob for taking his birthright and blessing, to the point that he threatened to kill him. Their mother Rebekah heard of Esau's intentions and warned Jacob, saying, "Now therefore, my son, obey my voice. Arise, flee to Laban, my brother in Haran." Because of this threat and his mother's intervention, Jacob was compelled to leave his home and begin his long exile. But that's the backstory to this week's Torah portion. Jacob sets off to return to his ancestral homeland. His route takes him near the borders of Edom, the territory that belonged to Esau and his descendants. Jacob left as a single man on the run, but he returns accompanied by 4 women, his 2 wives Leah and Rachel, and his 2 maidservants, and 12 children. In addition to his family, he returns with a vast amount of wealth and a herd of livestock. This wealth was so substantial that, fearing his brother Esau, Jacob divided his people and possessions into 2 camps, in case Esau attacked the first caravan that crossed over into Canaan. Jacob prepared a huge peace offering for Esau. From his herds, he sent 550 animals ahead in separate droves to soften Esau's disposition before their meeting. Along with the gift, Jacob sent messengers ahead to his brother in the land of Seir with a message intended to be an apology for his previous deception. Per Jacob's instruction, the messengers referred to Esau as "my lord Esau," and to Jacob as "your servant Jacob." He wanted to signal that he was not returning to challenge his brother. The messengers also reported that he had been blessed with wealth. Implicit in that news was Jacob's assurance that he was not returning to claim any part of the stolen inheritance. All Jacob sought was to find favor in Esau's sight. Jacob was not the same person returning to Canaan as he was when he left 20 years prior. The biblical narrative presents an intentional symmetry to show this transformation, framing his self-induced exile with 2 distinct nighttime encounters with the divine. These 2 events place parentheses around his time away, marking the beginning and the culmination of his spiritual journey. The change in Jacob began during his initial flight from home, but it was fully realized only upon his return. In both instances, Jacob was vulnerable and isolated. However, the nature of his interaction shifted dramatically from a passive recipient to an active recipient. The first encounter occurred at Bethel as Jacob fled the Promised Land. It was in a moment of lonely despair with a stone for a pillow that he first realized the powerful presence of God in his life. This experience was entirely passive. In his dream of angels ascending and descending a ladder, God stood above and offered a unilateral promise of land, descendants, and protection. Jacob awoke stunned by the revelation, admitting, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." At this stage, he was a fugitive receiving assurance of God's protective hand on his life. The second encounter took place at the Jabbok River the night before Jacob was to face Esau again. Mirroring his departure, Jacob was once again alone, having sent his wives, children, and possessions across the ford to safety. Genesis 32:24 sets the scene for this mysterious battle. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. The dynamic of this meeting was active. Jacob did not merely dream, he wrestled with a divine being. Neither prevailed, but when the opponent saw he could not overpower Jacob, he touched the patriarch's hip socket, dislocating it. Despite this injury, Jacob refused to release his grip until he received a blessing. The divine being then declared, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." While the earlier revelation at Bethel provided a promise of what God would do for him, This wrestling match resulted in a new identity. The entire Old Testament is the story of their struggle with God, but their absolute refusal to let go. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, in his commentary on this passage, wrote, "Faith does not mean certainty. It means the courage to live with uncertainty. It does not mean having the answers. It means having the courage to ask the questions and not let go of God, as He does not let go of us." For Sacks, the opposite of faith was not doubt, but the cessation of that wrestling match. The identity of the mysterious wrestler in Genesis is one of the most debated subjects in biblical interpretation. The text intentionally blurs the line between human, angelic, and divine. The narrative initially introduces the antagonist simply as a man, appearing out of the darkness. However, as the dawn breaks, the terminology shifts. The stranger states that Jacob has striven with God, and Jacob names the location Peniel, face of God, because he is convinced he has seen God face to face and survived. The prophet Hosea later harmonizes these descriptions in Hosea 12, stating that Jacob struggled with God and struggled with the angel, using the terms in parallel. Jewish tradition, specifically within the Midrash and the commentaries that expand upon the Mishnah, offers a specific identification that transforms the meaning of the fight. The rabbis teach that this man was not the creator God himself, but rather the guardian angel of Esau. In this view, the wrestling match was a necessary spiritual conquest preceding the physical reunion. Jacob could not hope to face his brother Esau in the flesh until he had first subdued Esau's spiritual representative in the heavenly realm. From a Christian perspective, this passage is traditionally interpreted as a Christophany, a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus Christ. This view asserts that the man was the eternal Son of God appearing in a temporary human form. This interpretation relies on the theological tension that while Exodus 33 states no man can see the Father and live, Jacob claims to have seen God face to face and survived. Christian theology resolves this by identifying the figure as the Son, who is the visible image of the invisible God. For the Christian reader, this mysterious wrestler represents the willingness of God to humble himself and enter the dust of human existence. The next day, when Jacob finally confronts Esau, he no longer seems afraid. Genesis 33 describes his approach. He himself went on ahead and bowed down to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. A newly humbled Jacob makes clear that it is not wealth or power that he cares to retain. He offers Esau a portion of his wealth, and he bows to Esau, submitting his power and prestige by referring to himself as a servant and to Esau as my lord. Strikingly, Jacob connects his reconciliation with Esau to his encounter with God. We see that wealth and power are not the portions of the birthright that Jacob holds for his own. What he intends to retain from the inheritance is the covenantal relationship with God that will forever be a sign to the world of God's fidelity. Israel, both the man and the nation, is born. That's it for this week. In the newsletter version of the episode, I'm including 3 questions that you can study for either your personal use or a group study. They're thought-provoking questions that I think the text asks of us as readers. Be sure to sign up for our emails at thejerusalemconnection.us. Join me next week as we read Vayishlach, which covers Genesis 37:1 to 40:23. Shabbat Shalom and Am Israel Chai.